Have you ever met someone whose kindness shines brightest when no one's watching? Well, what if I told you that one act of compassion from a tired nurse late at night would soon change her entire life forever? Stick with me till the end, because what happened next will melt your heart. And if you love true stories that restore faith in humanity, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live for more inspiring stories every week. It was well past midnight at St. Helena's Children's Hospital. The hallway lights dimmed to a warm golden glow, and the air was filled with the faint beeping of heart monitors. Most nurses had already finished their shifts and gone home. But one nurse remained behind, Nurse Emily Carter, a gentle woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a heart too big for her own good. She was supposed to leave hours ago, but something stopped her: the soft whimper of a frightened little boy in room 209. The boy's name was Tommy, just 6 years old, battling pneumonia. His parents were out of town on an emergency trip, and tonight was his first night alone in the hospital. Emily had tried to tuck him in earlier, but each time she walked away, his small voice called out, trembling, "Please don't go, Miss Emily. It's dark." Emily sighed softly, removing her jacket again. "All right, champ," she whispered with a gentle smile. "I'll stay a little longer." She pulled up a chair beside his bed, holding his tiny hand wrapped in an IV line. His hand was so small, so fragile, yet the way he clutched hers made her heart ache. Outside the room, the night shift janitor mopped the floor quietly, humming an old tune. Everything was still, peaceful, the kind of peace that comes only in the deep hours of the night when the world sleeps and only the kind-hearted stay awake. Emily hummed a lullaby, one her mother used to sing when she was little. Her voice was soft, soothing, like a breeze brushing over calm water. Tommy's eyelids fluttered. For the first time that night, his breathing steadied. "Better?" she asked softly. He nodded, his little lips curling into a drowsy smile. "You sound like my mommy." Her heart clenched. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Then I'll sing until your mommy comes back, okay?" He nodded again, his grip loosening as sleep began to take him. As the minutes passed, Emily forgot about her exhaustion, her aching feet, the long hours of double shifts, and the rent she was struggling to pay. In that quiet room, the only thing that mattered was that this little boy wasn't alone. What Emily didn't know was that someone was watching. At the far end of the corridor, standing half in shadow, was Mr. Jonathan Blake, a man in an expensive tailored coat, visiting the hospital to see his nephew who had been admitted earlier that day. Jonathan was the kind of man who lived in luxury, a successful businessman known for his sharp mind and colder demeanor. But tonight, something unusual caught his attention. A nurse long past her shift, comforting a child who wasn't even her responsibility. He lingered quietly, listening to her lullaby. Something about her voice, the selfless tenderness, stirred something deep within him. When Emily finally got up and tucked Tommy in, she turned to leave. Her shift badge dangled from her scrubs, and she looked utterly drained. As she stepped out of the room, Jonathan took a step forward. "Excuse me," he said softly. Emily turned, startled. "Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry, visiting hours are over. Are you looking for someone?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "I was visiting my nephew, but I saw what you did for that boy." Her cheeks flushed. "Oh, it's nothing, really. He was scared. I couldn't just leave him crying." "Most people would have," Jonathan said. His eyes lingered thoughtfully. "You must love your job." Emily looked down, her voice quiet. "I do, even when it's hard." For a moment there was silence. Jonathan nodded slowly. "You're a good person, Nurse Carter." And then he walked away, leaving her puzzled but smiling faintly. As she turned back to check on Tommy one last time, Emily had no idea that the man she had just met would soon return and bring with him a gift that would change her life forever. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness plants a seed in someone's heart, and you never know how that seed will grow. What happened the next morning will leave you believing that compassion truly changes everything. If you're new here, hit that like button and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, because this next part is where the story begins to turn. The morning sunlight poured through the tall hospital windows, chasing away the stillness of the night. Nurse Emily Carter yawned softly as she finished her shift. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, and her hands still smelled faintly of antiseptic soap. She checked her watch. She'd been there for nearly 16 hours straight. As she gathered her things, she stopped by room 209 one last time. Tommy was still asleep, a small stuffed bear tucked under his arm. Emily smiled, her heart full. She whispered, "Sleep well, little one," before heading to the nurse's lounge. She didn't see the man waiting outside the hospital entrance. Jonathan Blake stood by his sleek black car, his phone in one hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. He had spent most of the night thinking about that nurse, about the way she sang, the way she stayed behind without asking for praise or recognition. It had stirred something unfamiliar in him. For years, Jonathan had believed success was about profit margins and power. But last night, watching Emily, he'd realized there was something richer than wealth, humanity. When he saw her exiting the hospital, he approached. "Miss Carter?" he called. Emily blinked, confused. "Oh, you're the gentleman from last night, right? Mr. Blake?" He nodded. "You remember. How could I forget?" She smiled, though her tone carried exhaustion. "You startled me." Jonathan chuckled. "My apologies again. I just wanted to thank you. Not everyone would do what you did." Emily shrugged. "Honestly, it didn't feel like anything special. That little boy, Tommy, he reminded me of my younger brother. He used to cry at night when he was sick. I guess some instincts just don't fade." Jonathan studied her quietly. "Do you always stay late like that?" She hesitated, adjusting the strap of her worn-out bag. "Sometimes. The kids get scared and, well, someone's got to be there." He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the faded scrubs, the way her shoes looked like they'd seen years of service. "Doesn't the hospital compensate you for extra hours?" he asked. Emily laughed softly, a tired, honest laugh. "You'd think so, but no. I'm on hourly shifts. Once my clock-out time hits, any minute after that is free labor, technically. But these kids don't understand time cards." Jonathan's brow furrowed. He couldn't imagine working so hard, giving so much for so little. "Why do you keep doing it?" Her answer came gently, without hesitation. "Because it matters. You never know what people are going through. Maybe that one song or that one smile makes someone's pain a little smaller." Jonathan felt something shift inside him, something that had been dormant for years. He cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, would you mind having a cup of coffee with me, just as a thank you for what you did?" Emily looked surprised. "Oh, I really shouldn't. My shift's over and I've got to catch the bus soon." "I can give you a ride," he offered quickly. No strings attached, just coffee and conversation. After a moment's hesitation, Emily nodded. "All right, but only because you asked nicely." They sat in the small cafe across the street. Jonathan ordered 2 cappuccinos while Emily stirred hers slowly, feeling oddly out of place sitting across from a man whose watch probably cost more than her monthly rent. "So," Jonathan said, breaking the silence, "how long have you been a nurse?" 8 years, she said proudly. "Started right after nursing school. It's not easy, but I love it." He leaned forward. "And if you could change one thing about your job, what would it be?" She smiled sadly. "I'd want more time. Time to comfort every child properly, not rush from room to room because we're understaffed. And maybe a hospital library or playroom for them. Some of these kids stay here for weeks. They need more than medicine. They need hope." Jonathan nodded slowly. He didn't say it, but an idea was already forming in his mind. As they talked, Emily shared stories of children who fought bravely, of parents who cried in hallways, of laughter that somehow survived even in pain. Jonathan listened, captivated. For once, he wasn't the man in charge, the billionaire CEO. He was just a man listening to someone whose heart shone brighter than his fortune ever could. When Emily finally stood to leave, Jonathan said softly, "Miss Carter, thank you for today, and last night." She smiled warmly. "You don't need to thank me. Just pay it forward someday." Jonathan's gaze softened. "I will." As she waved goodbye and walked toward the bus stop, Jonathan watched her go. And in that moment, he made a decision. A quiet, powerful decision that would soon change Emily's world forever. Sometimes kindness plants a seed so deep, you don't even realize when it begins to bloom. Nurse Emily had no idea that her small act of compassion was about to come back to her in the most unexpected way. "Stay with me till the end. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, because this part will touch your soul. A week passed at St. Helena's Hospital. The days blurred into each other, filled with beeping monitors, rushing footsteps, and whispered prayers. For Emily Carter, it was just another stretch of long shifts and sleepless nights. Tommy, the little boy with pneumonia, had started getting better. His laugh had returned, the kind that filled the room with pure, innocent joy. Every time Emily walked in, he would grin from ear to ear. "Miss Emily, you came back," he'd shout excitedly. "Of course I did," she'd smile. "I had to check if my favorite patient was behaving." But beneath her smile, Emily was exhausted. Her bills were piling up, her mother's medication costs had gone up again, and her old car had finally broken down. Still, she kept showing up, and because kindness for her wasn't a job, it was who she was. One evening, just before her shift ended, the hospital administrator, Mr. Lewis, approached her desk. "Nurse Carter," he said, holding a folder, "we have a special visitor coming tomorrow. A Mr. Jonathan Blake. He's one of the major donors reviewing our pediatric department." Emily's pen froze midair. "Jonathan Blake?" "Yes, do you know him?" She hesitated. "I met him once. He visited his nephew." Mr. Lewis smiled faintly. "Well, he seems quite interested in the children's ward. Make sure everything's in order tomorrow." Emily nodded, though her mind was spinning. What was he doing back here? The next morning, the hospital buzzed with quiet anticipation. Nurses straightened their uniforms, doctors checked charts twice, and even the janitors polished the floors until they gleamed. When Jonathan arrived, his presence commanded the room, tall, well-dressed, confident. But unlike before, there was something gentler about him now, a softness behind the businesslike demeanor. He shook hands with the hospital board, listened to presentations, nodded at reports. But all the while, his eyes occasionally drifted toward the pediatric wing. Finally, he asked, "May I see the children's ward?" Mr. Lewis eagerly led the way, and soon they reached the familiar hallway lined with colorful murals and tiny beds. When Emily saw him standing by the door, she almost dropped her clipboard. "Mr. Blake," he smiled warmly. "Miss Carter, you're—" "Here again," she said softly. He nodded. "I had to see how my favorite nurse was doing." Emily blushed faintly. "You must have a lot of favorite nurses." "Just one, actually," he replied with a small grin. Before she could respond, Tommy's cheerful voice interrupted. "Mr. Jonathan, you came back." Jonathan crouched beside him, smiling. "Of course, little man. You feeling stronger?" Tommy nodded proudly. "Miss Emily says I can go home soon." "That's wonderful news," Jonathan said, glancing at Emily with admiration. As they toured the ward, Jonathan noticed the peeling paint, the outdated equipment, the old books in the play corner. Everything looked tired, not from neglect but from overuse. He could see how much the nurses were trying to make the best of so little. When they returned to the corridor, he turned to Mr. Lewis. "This department could use an upgrade. The children deserve better." Mr. Lewis sighed. "We've been trying to raise funds for months, sir, but budgets are tight." Jonathan's gaze lingered on Emily, who was adjusting a child's blanket. Then, with quiet resolve, he said, "What if I made a donation, enough to renovate the entire ward, new beds, better equipment, a proper playroom?" Mr. Lewis blinked, stunned. "Mr. Blake, that would be incredible." Emily turned sharply, her eyes wide. "You'd really do that?" Jonathan smiled softly. "Let's just say your wish over coffee stuck with me." Her voice trembled slightly. "But why?" "You don't owe us anything." He shook his head. "You don't understand, Miss Carter. What you did that night, staying late, comforting a scared child, it changed something in me. I've spent years building empires, making money, chasing numbers, but for the first time in a long time I saw what real wealth looks like, compassion." Emily was speechless. Her eyes glistened with emotion. "Jonathan, that's beyond generous." He smiled gently. "You inspired it." By the end of the day, the news had spread through the hospital. The children's wing was going to be completely transformed. New toys, new paint, and even a small library, just like Emily had dreamed of. But Jonathan wasn't finished yet. As he left the hospital, he made one more quiet request to Mr. Lewis, something he didn't want Emily to know about. "I'd like to speak to you privately," he said. "There's something else I want to do. for Nurse Carter. When kindness touches the right heart, it comes back multiplied. What Jonathan did next for Nurse Emily wasn't just generous. It was something that would change her life forever. Stay till the end and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, because this part will warm your heart. 3 days had passed since Jonathan Blake's visit, and St. Helena's Hospital was buzzing with excitement. The news had spread fast. The children's wing was getting a complete makeover. New beds, bright colors, toys, and even a small playroom for the kids to feel at home. Every nurse was thrilled, but none more than Emily Carter. She couldn't stop thinking about that conversation in the hallway, about Jonathan's promise to bring light into that place where she'd spent so many weary nights. Yet, deep inside, she didn't expect anything for herself. She wasn't the type to hope for rewards. For her, kindness was never a transaction. It was a calling. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when Emily was called to the administrator's office. "Mr. Lewis wants to see you," said one of her colleagues. Emily frowned. "Me? Did I do something wrong?" Her colleague smiled mysteriously. "Just go. You'll see." With a mix of confusion and worry, Emily walked down the polished hallway and knocked on the office door. "Come in," said Mr. Lewis. Inside, Jonathan Blake was already seated. He rose to his feet when she entered, smiling warmly. "Mr. Blake?" she said, surprised. "I didn't know you were here." He gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." Emily hesitated before taking a seat. "Is everything all right?" Jonathan folded his hands, his tone gentle. "Better than all right. You see, Miss Carter, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about time, and how you wished you could give every child comfort, not just care." She nodded slowly, unsure where he was going. "I realized," he continued, "that good people like you keep this place running. You give more than your time, you give your heart. And it's time someone gave something back." Emily blinked, confused. I don't understand." Jonathan smiled and looked toward Mr. Lewis, who handed her a white envelope. "Open it," Jonathan said softly. With trembling hands, Emily tore it open and gasped. Inside was a letter on hospital stationery. Her eyes scanned the words and her mouth fell open. "Effective immediately, Nurse Emily Carter is hereby promoted to Head Pediatric Care Coordinator, with a full-time salary, benefits, and leadership over the new children's program funded by the Blake Foundation." Emily looked up in disbelief. "This can't be real." Jonathan nodded. "It's very real. The foundation will sponsor your department for the next 5 years. And you'll be in charge of running the new children's program, the one you dreamed about." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Mr. Blake, I don't know what to say. I never expected—" He interrupted softly. "You don't have to say anything. You've already done enough by just being who you are." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Jonathan smiled. "Don't thank me. You inspired it. You taught me that true success isn't about numbers, and it's about people. About leaving a mark on hearts, not bank accounts." Mr. Lewis added with a grin. "There's more." Jonathan turned to him and nodded. "Yes, one more thing." He pulled out a small velvet box and slid it across the table. Inside lay a silver pendant, simple, elegant, engraved with 2 words. "Stay kind." Emily touched it delicately, tears spilling freely now. "It's beautiful." Jonathan's voice softened. "It's a reminder. For all those nights you stayed when no one asked you to. For all those hearts you healed just by being there. The world needs more people like you. People who stay kind even when no one's watching." She smiled through tears. "You didn't have to do any of this, Jonathan." He looked at her meaningfully. "Yes, I did. Because people like you remind the rest of us what really matters." Later that night, Emily walked through the children's ward with a heart lighter than it had been in years. She peeked into Tommy's room. He was fast asleep, a small superhero mask over his eyes. She chuckled softly, tucking the blanket around him. As she looked around, she could already imagine the new space. Bright murals, shelves of books, laughter echoing through the hallways. It felt like hope had finally moved in. She touched the pendant around her neck, whispering to herself, "Stay kind." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jonathan. Your new playroom plans are approved. Construction starts Monday. P.S. Don't forget to rest once in a while, Nurse Carter. Emily smiled at the screen, her heart full. For once, the kindness she had given out freely had found its way back, multiplied beyond measure. They say when you give from the heart, the universe finds a way to give it back, sometimes in ways you never imagined. What you're about to hear in this final chapter will remind you why kindness is the greatest legacy of all. So before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, because this ending will touch your soul. 2 months later, St. Helena's Children's Hospital was almost unrecognizable. The dull beige walls were now painted with bright murals. Rainbows, mountains, cartoon animals dancing under blue skies. The once empty playroom now echoed with laughter and music. There were books, toys, even a digital art corner donated by the Blake Foundation. Every corner breathed new life, and at the heart of it all was Nurse Emily Carter, now proudly wearing her new badge, head pediatric care coordinator. Her once tired eyes now shone with energy. Each morning she greeted every child by name, organized art days, and made sure the playroom stayed filled with laughter. Parents smiled more now. Kids healed faster. The air itself felt lighter, as if hope had finally taken root in the walls. And yet Emily still stayed late some nights. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Some things about her heart hadn't changed. One evening, she sat beside Tommy, who was finally ready to be discharged after months of treatment. He looked healthier, brighter, his cheeks full of color again. "Miss Emily," he said shyly, "are you going to miss me?" She smiled warmly. "Of course I am. Who else will make me laugh during night shifts?" He grinned, handing her a crumpled piece of paper. "I made this for you." She unfolded it. It was a childish drawing of her and Tommy standing under a rainbow, with the words, "Thank you for not leaving me." Emily's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, Tommy. I'll keep it forever." His mother, standing by the door, wiped tears from her eyes. "Thank you, Nurse Carter. You were there when I couldn't be. You'll never know what that means to us." Emily hugged Tommy one last time, her eyes glistening. "You be brave, okay? Keep smiling, superhero." Later that night, as the hospital quieted down, Emily walked out into the courtyard for a breath of fresh air. The sky was painted in deep shades of twilight, stars beginning to peek through. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the calm, until she heard footsteps behind her. "Still staying late, I see," a familiar voice teased. She turned, smiling. "Jonathan, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that," he chuckled. "Old habits." They stood side by side, watching the lights inside the children's ward flicker softly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Emily said. "I still can't believe all this happened." Jonathan looked at her with quiet admiration. "Believe it. You made it happen. You're the heartbeat of this place." She smiled, then looked down. "You've done more than enough, Jonathan. The foundation, the renovations. I don't even know how to thank you." He shook his head gently. "You already have. You showed me what real success looks like, not in profit, but in purpose." Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "You changed too, you know. You're not the same man I met that night." He smiled faintly. "Maybe your kindness rubbed off on me." They both laughed softly, a shared warmth filling the cool night air. Then Jonathan reached into his coat pocket and handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, hesitant. "Open it," he said simply. Inside was a letter, this time not from the hospital, but from the Blake Foundation. It read, "The Blake Foundation is honored to announce the establishment of the Emily Carter Scholarship for Compassionate Nursing, created to help young nursing students who share your heart for healing. Your story inspired this, and your name will continue to inspire generations." Emily froze. Tears welled in her eyes, her hands trembling. "A scholarship? In my name?" Jonathan nodded. "Because kindness like yours deserves to live on, not just in this hospital, but in every heart it touches." For the first time, she couldn't speak. She simply reached out and hugged him, whispering, "Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." He smiled gently. "No, Emily, thank you." Weeks later, the new children's wing was officially inaugurated. The mayor attended, reporters came, and cameras flashed as the ribbon was cut. But when Emily stepped onto the small stage to speak, she didn't talk about money or titles. She simply said, voice trembling but clear, kindness is not about having much. It's about giving what you can. Sometimes it's just staying when someone is scared. Sometimes it's a smile or a song or a few extra minutes of care. But no act of kindness is ever wasted, because one day it finds its way back and multiplied. The room erupted in applause. Jonathan stood among the crowd, clapping quietly, his eyes glistening with pride. As the event ended, Emily walked through the ward once more, her heart full. She stopped by Tommy's old bed, now occupied by another child, and whispered, "Sweet dreams." The world outside was loud and uncertain, but inside those hospital walls one truth stood unshaken. Kindness still had power. And that, my friends, is why we tell stories like these. Because even the smallest act of compassion can ripple across lives in ways we may never see. So if this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live, where real kindness lives on in every story we tell. Remember, always stay kind.